Mass Media.
Welcome to Beyond the Doors, where real estate pros Nate and Daniel bring you the latest market trends, the stories behind the big deals, and the inside scoop on housing politics. With years of experience and a good dose of fun, they break it all down alongside interesting guests and experts in the field. So, if you want to know what's really going on in the world of real estate, you're in the right place.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Doors. I'm Daniel Skolnick here with my co-host Nate Abbo, and we've got a very special guest today from YIMBY Dems of San Diego, Saad Asad. How are you, gentlemen?
Good. How are you guys?
Good. I'm feeling excellent.
Good. I love it. Rain's over and weather's nice. We'll get to have some fun today in the studio, so it should be a good day.
Yeah. Back to the weather tax.
Totally. So we've got an interesting and engaging conversation today with our guest. Saad Asad is a political chair and runs communications for a very special organization called the YIMBY Dems, which I'm going to let you tell us a little bit about you and the organization. But for all of our listeners that don't know what YIMBY is Yes in My Backyard, which is a major contributor to helping housing policy and keeping roofs over people's heads. So, Saad, I'm going to throw it to you. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it. Thank you for having me on here. So, as you said, YIMBY is Yes in My Backyard. Start there just because I think that kind of helps define what YIMBY Dems is. It's a group of grassroots activists started out in San Francisco because of the high housing costs and spread across the state. We're a local group, the YIMBY Democrats of San Diego County. We're an affiliate of the San Diego Democratic Party, but we can make our own endorsements. We kind of run our own communications, run our own strategy. But our focus is on how can we increase more homes in San Diego. San Diego faces a major housing shortage, which is causing both rent and home prices to spike, making it unaffordable for everyone. And I'm the comps lead at the YIMBY Dems of San Diego.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that with us. Tell us a bit about the organization's key mission. You mentioned how it's grassroots and all of these amazing things that make the organization so strong, but what's the mission?
Yeah. So the main mission is making housing more affordable. And the main way that we see that happening is through increasing production, increasing the supply of homes. There are other important aspects of affordability, like the federal government provides subsidies, vouchers to people who are on the very low income side. But right now in San Diego, even middle income people are facing skyrocketing housing costs. And that's partially just because we have not been building enough housing. And that's usually because there's lots of folks who've kind of made it, they have their homes, and whenever they see new projects going up near them, they oppose it vitriolically and will do anything to stop it from happening. So we're there to be the opposite. We're to say, yes, in my backyard. We want those homes because we know that will have an impact on making people be able to afford to live in San Diego and stay in San Diego.
Yeah, which is, a major issue. There was a KPBS article recently where San Diego region lost, I think close to 25 or 30,000 people. We had net positive population growth because of immigration, but we're losing people because of affordability. I think that's the number one driver.
Yeah. And the people we're losing tend to be more of like the middle class and lower class. And the people who are coming are more wealthy people who can afford to live here. And so that only makes the problem worse because the wealthy can afford these high prices, but they essentially bid up the price for everyone else. And then that just makes the problem worse. Those people leave and you essentially get a retirement community, which is not what San Diego is about. It's a place where all people should get to live.
Right. I know it's a dynamic city. And Nate and I have talked about this many times with different guests. Is like we're a tier 1 city, but that's growing. Like we're growing into our shoes right now, and we need the housing stock in order to keep that growth going, and not only accommodate new people coming in because San Diego is a great place, but like the San Diegans need a place to stay. Right, that's a major issue. Like Nate was telling me on the way in, like the amount of properties selling right now are slim to none because people are stuck in the home. The ones that are already there can't afford to leave. And yet there's a glut of issues that are keeping new production from coming online. So it's like we're in this perfect storm of a housing crisis, which I will say, and maybe you guys both agree with me, there's been a lot of progress, but you can't give up on that. You got to keep pushing on that because we need more.
I'm seeing this stuff firsthand, exactly what you just said. The idea of ownership is gone. For most people, they think it's impossible, can't happen. I saw a stat recently said something along the lines of 15% of the people in California are doing 90% of the deals, which just kind of goes hand in hand with what you just said. We need to get housing affordable for people, but the question is how. So groups like yours, I can really appreciate. What are some initiatives you guys are kind of looking at or doing right now to help with this?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest things that we don't have anymore in California is the starter home, or even just those beginner condos. That whole property type just doesn't exist anymore, or is newly built. There's some that exist pre-2000s, but we're just not building that option. So when people go out there in the market, they only have the option of a large home on a large lot. And in order to afford that, they just have to keep on driving out east. When California, you're largely going to be driving out east to eventually afford something, and it's going to be a large home and a large lot. So one of the things that we need to allow is just allowing more home options in more parts of the city, more parts of the county. Crazy stat is that over 90% of California cities' residential land bans like apartments and condos. Mm-hmm. It can only allow large homes and large lots. And that means if you can't afford that, good luck. Go to Arizona. So I think part of it is just allowing more home options across different parts of the city, the county. And so that's part of like the legal changes, that there's rules, the zoning rules that say only certain types of homes can be built in certain types of areas. So that's one part. Other parts is like the permitting. Permitting can be slow. It can take a long time. There's lots of convoluted areas to it. How can we streamline that to reduce delay and reduce uncertainty that makes it more likely for home builders to do that? There's another interesting study I read that there's lots of delay both in rural areas and in urban areas when it comes to permits. But because the land cost is so much cheaper in rural areas, they might as well just buy up that land to not have to worry about the delay. And so then you just get more sprawl when people could be just building closer to where jobs and schools already exist. So there's a lot of different areas, but yeah, it's like the zoning, fee reform, permitting reform, all the rules that kind of make it hard to just allow more homes.
Yeah, one policy change we're really tracking is AB 1033. Mm-hmm. Which, look, as a developer of missing middle housing, and Nate is an owner operator of a diverse portfolio and also a realtor, so he's selling a lot of the product that's already built. AB 1033 seems to be a massive needle mover because it creates a mechanism to convert new and existing stock to be a starter home, right? Mm-hmm. So has the YIMBY Dems been involved in any conversations or initiatives to see that come to San Diego sooner?
Yeah, so that's something that we're going to be focusing in on this year. So we heard from City Council or the City Planning Director that they plan to implement AB 1033 later this year. And so for context, AB 1033 allows ADUs to be sold for homes and not just rented. ADUs have been one of the biggest contributors to new housing in California. They just have skyrocketed across every city, but they are largely for rent properties. So allowing them to be for sale will open up huge new home ownership opportunities. And so that's something that we're definitely want to be advocating for. A few cities have already adopted it. I believe it's Santa Clara, Berkeley, and Santa Cruz. And we're really eager to see that happen in San Diego. And we'll be mobilizing definitely our membership to advocate it to their city council members for sure.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that's going to be huge for a number of reasons. But you know what's funny? I think the last time AB 33 or a similar policy was coming to fruition, I think that it was either CARS, California Association of Realtors, or NAR, and the National Association, opposed it. And I think it was really foolish and short-sighted. I'm hoping this time around there's going to be a lot of support. I mean, look, it's already a state law, right? So now it's all about local implementation. But yeah, there was opposed at one point, which was just crazy to me because there was so obvious a good thing for starter homes, and especially for realtors who needed stock to sell, you would think that it would be a lot of buy-in. But yeah, we're tracking it very closely. I think it's going to be a very powerful program to create those starter homes. Are there any other ones that any other policy changes or initiatives that you could talk about that might do the same thing?
Yeah, well, in the homeownership arena, I think there's just a lot that needs to happen at the state level first. So there's things called like condo defect liability, a mouthful, but essentially we have consumer protection rules around the building of condos. But those rules are very strict and make home builders very liable for condos that are built, and people can sue decades after for any fault. I think their consumer protection is important, but there needs to be a fine balance between consumer protection and creating it. If you make something so consumer protection laws around it that you're not producing that good anymore, then something needs to change. So I think that's a critical part that needs to happen at the state level for sure. Locally, there's fewer avenues for like home, because so much is related to state law. But I think part of it is still just opening up production and allowing for more areas of the city to allow for more homes, and eventually allowing those homes to be built is critical on the home ownership side. There's a few other policies we're focusing on like for production and allowing more homes, but I think home ownership, it's going to be AB 1033 is the main area that we're focused locally. And then I think state bills really need to unlock a lot of that. I think there's one area that's going to be in a state bill is tax credits for home builders to produce middle income housing. But again, that's going to happen at the state level, not the local level.
All right. Well, the state's been a big leader in a lot of housing initiatives, and then you're seeing cities then having to adopt their own housing elements, and then you've got San Diego, who's been a leader, right, an award-winning city when it comes to housing production. But there's still always more to do. And we could even talk a bit about what's going on locally in San Diego. I mean, we've pretty much had a very pro-housing city council for the last 8 years, but if you're looking at what's happening recently, that margin is slimming, and I don't know if policymakers are forgetting we're in a housing crisis or they're overlooking it, but we're still very much in one, right? And there's a lot of work to be done.
What strides are you aware have been made towards reducing the permitting process or getting us past this 2-year, 1-year thing to create these ADUs in these housing? Yeah,
I'll be honest, I don't know the specifics of what happens in the development services department within like the city of San Diego. I know that definitely the permitting timelines, at least from what they've shared publicly, have decreased a little bit over the past 2 years with new leadership and just efficiency. Some of it is just technology, making sure that's accessible for both the home builder when they need to see something, and just reducing a lot of the back and forth. But some of it is just the statutes and rules, and that needs to be changed. Assembly Member Ward has produced a bill that's kind of like a third-party permitting shot clock that if the local planning or development services department isn't able to approve it, go to a third-party inspector to approve it. However, this only applies for buildings under 10 homes, under 10 units.
That would be huge. I recently completed it was 3 units. I added 2 ADUs. Okay, took 18 months to get this approval process. Mostly because of the back and forth you just mentioned and how the city worked with the fire department, right? So I had to go back and forth. City would approve something, then go back to fire. Fire doesn't approve it. Probably had 50 changes. Yeah. 18 months.
Yeah, that's the nuance in home building, both for sale and for rent. I mean, if something like that could come to fruition, it would be a massive deal mover, because on the development side, like rule number 1, time kills deals, because it becomes very expensive. We're feeding those deals for years at a time before we bring them online. That's a lot of expense that we then have to recoup, which then translates into rents and affordability, right? And so if we could hold municipalities accountable, and not only that, but also another issue that is being talked about is utility companies. We're not in a state where we can choose our own utility. So there's a lot of monopoly around utility, and those timelines, I'll tell you, are getting only worse and worse. So even though the state and local governments are doing everything they can to create housing production, the utility company is getting a little lazy because they're saying, oh, well, it's coming to us anyway, right? And so they don't have that incentive to say, yes, let's get power quickly. Let's get these units online quickly. And really, it's the end user who's suffering, because that housing stock is stuck in production and work in progress versus coming online faster. So if assembly member wards build come to Freud, that would be a massive help. If it really helps people accountable.
How many builds have you done where you're waiting for SDG&E to turn on gas?
We've never completed a project where we're not waiting on them. How about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's every time. Me, my builders, I hear it every day.
Never, ever. And we'll have a building sitting there ready to go, but it's a paperweight until I get gas and electric.
And this is something I don't know as much about. My understanding is that the fees for like the utility connection are pretty high as well.
Yeah. So that there was a change last year where the CPUC base was just California Public Utility came out and said we want to go all electric, right? To be in line with the climate action plan and to get away from carbon fuel. And so now if you're an all electric project, you can get it's not rebates, but it's basically allowances. So if the grid needs upgrades, you get a certain amount of allowances per unit. So I'll give you an example. If you're doing a 10-unit project, you get, let's say, $40,000 in allowance. So if the grid needs upgrades to service your property, the first $40,000 is covered by SDG&E, and then the developer has to pay for everything after that. Well, the issue is going all electric is a pretty big load on the grid, and the grid is old. And so those allowances are not nearly enough to cover the upgrades. I mean, we've done projects where we replaced 2 city blocks of poles because they're in poor condition and the wiring is bad and you've got to upgrade transformers. And so there's that disconnect where the intent is there, but the mechanics aren't. But that's an evolving issue, right? I mean, that if the policy is there, which is what YIMBY Dems are focused on, the rest will flush out, right? So I think that's why it's so important the work your group does.
Yeah, I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head with the time. I mean, you live it, but I think often folks don't understand that the time, only people who can often carry the cost of like long development timelines are these large regional and national builders, and they're great. They're great. They need to be able here to build those homes, but local small businesses, mom and pop builders, they can't carry the costs for 2, 3, 5, 7 years. They just leave the business if they can't produce anything and they can't turn around and make profit as a business. So I think that's the other important part, is just recreating this group of business people who are creating homes. They bring wealth to local communities and they add to the fabric of San Diego. So it's beyond just, of course the housing is really important, but another underlooked part is just bringing back a class of builders that have kind of just disappeared because we essentially made it illegal for those types of businesses to exist.
Right. And it's those types of local builders that leverage policies that create urban infill projects, which in my opinion, those are the projects that get 1 + 1 = 3, because you're taking something dilapidated, underutilized, and you're creating so much with the same underlying land without disturbing the surrounding neighborhood. Right? It's just you get to really maximize a parcel, and urbanized environments where there's already employment and transit and community. Right? Restaurants and banks and local businesses all around. So you're further perpetuating this like community ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who is the organization up against right now? So YIMBY Dems is championing a lot of land use, pro-housing policy. Who's on the other side?
Yeah, so there are a lot of typically older, wealthier homeowners who don't want to see changes in their neighborhood. And a lot of them are kind of like localized to their specific neighborhood. I can't even remember some of their names, but they'll be like Save whatever their neighborhood's name is. And that's typically the groups that we often go against in advocacy and going to city council, that of course, there are going to be impacts to a neighborhood when you're adding homes to it. Like, I'm not going to pretend like that doesn't exist, but there's trade-offs that exist as well.
Totally. I mean, look, nothing stays the same forever.
Yeah.
So change is inevitable, right? And of course, sometimes it could be a little uncomfortable, disruptive, or it's new. Like, like people were scared of iPhones at one point. Like, do you remember the year 2000? Like, people thought things, clocks would blow up. So it's, of course, like, change can be a little uncomfortable, but ultimately, everything evolves.
Yeah, I think a lot of these groups just want to freeze everything in amber, and just the way that they imagine these neighborhoods when they bought their home 20, 30 years ago is how they want it to stay. And they haven't thought about, this next generation doesn't have the same opportunities that you had. They can't buy into this neighborhood. Those opportunities don't exist. And I think with a lot of things, as you said, once people kind of see it and they accept it, it's like not as radical once that new homes are built. Like the example I think of is in Uptown, there's this building called the Saad. The local neighbors were adamantly protesting it. It's about an 8-story building, no parking in the Mission Hills neighborhood. And Mission Hills is a very wealthy neighborhood where they very much hate new housing, and they were adamantly against it. But it's up and it's built now, and it's gorgeous. It's this pink 8-story building with lovely plants along the side. The first floor has this nice coffee shop with a courtyard. The top floor has a rooftop restaurant, and all hell didn't break loose because there was no parking. There's bus lines there. If there's a nurse that lives there, they can walk to work down at the Hillcrest medical complex. So I think people just assume the worst when change is going to happen. When it happens, like, you'll benefit too. You will benefit from the gains of new housing.
Totally.
There's more to come on Beyond the Doors here on the OLS Media Network. We'll be back right after this quick break.
The Dear San Diego podcast is produced in collaboration with The Times of San Diego. Repeatedly recognized by the San Diego Press Club, The Times of San Diego delivers timely and transparent news to, for, and about America's finest city. To learn more on how you can support this trusted resource of information, visit timesofsandiego.com.
When I wrote my book, The Insider's Guide, in 2019, I set out to demystify digital fundraising. Now, in 2024, I'm giving you access to some of those insiders and the world of nonprofit fundraising through my podcast, From the Nest with me, Charity Jen. Visit olsmedia.com and subscribe to From the Nest with Charity Jen, where fundraising takes flight.
Hey, it's Daniel from Beyond the Doors. We're super excited to be a part of the OLS Media Network, recording right here in San Diego, alongside some amazing podcasts. There's a host of wonderful shows from all types of genres for the true San Diegan who wants to know more about local officials and their journey to success. There's Dear San Diego with my good friend, Tony Monalatos. And of course, there's a true crime podcast with one of the most notable prosecutors in California history, Anne Marie Schubert. Basically, like real estate, there's a little something for all walks of life. You won't want to miss it. So head over to olsmedia.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to follow or subscribe while you're there. Now, let's get back to the show.
You're listening to Beyond the Doors. Let's jump back into our conversation with our guest.
I still hear about it. So many people are leaving to, Chicago, New York, Florida, because there is the jobs there and they can find more affordable living. It's crazy for San Diego to lose those people.
I own real estate right next to that project that you're talking about in Mission Hills, and there's probably like 5 cranes in Mission Hills right now. The biggest fear, I understand what they're saying too, but they're worried about parking and they're worried about traffic, and they're saying we don't have the infrastructure. So I think infrastructure is a big part of this too. So if we can alleviate their fears with upcoming infrastructure that will kind of help these problems, I think that should be another initiative that we need to talk about too, and that will help us ultimately drive this whole building kind of momentum. I think that's a big part of it. Parking has always been the big thing. What's going to happen with parking? For instance, there's another project in Mission Hills where they're building like 100 units with 60 parking spaces. People are naturally going to be afraid of that because there's already no parking.
Yeah.
So how do it needs to be a good balance.
Yeah, we definitely need, of course, like bus lines running more frequently, trolley lines running more frequently, as people don't have to rely on cars. And building in those neighborhoods that have access to walkable, like, Mission Hills is a relatively walkable neighborhood.
Totally.
You can walk to the grocery store. You can walk to potentially work if you live in the, you work at the medical center. So that's I think that's a critical. I think what can often happen is you see there is infrastructure costs and the city sees that and they say, all right, let's put another fee on the home builder to pay for that infrastructure. And then the result is those homes don't get built because those fees are often so high. The infrastructure costs need to be shared across the city. And yeah, it just needs to be a dedicated thing that we continue to invest in, is more infrastructure, better sidewalks, better pedestrian access, and more regular transit, so people don't have to rely on their cars much.
Yeah, I mean, it's transit, clear rules of engagement, deregulation, and stay mission focused when there's a crisis at hand. Like, with that philosophy, housing is going to get built, and also with fees, you're so right. I mean, you can't just tack on another fee, because it all translates to cost. Cost translates to higher cost of living. So it's like, you've got to work with what you've got and just be smart and efficient about it. Because I'll tell you, big or small projects, they're paying tens of thousands, anywhere to millions of dollars in fees on any given project. I mean, even on our smaller projects, which are about 6 units, we've got about $50,000 in fees right there. And that's a small project. That's what, $9,000 a unit. It's a lot, I'd love to hear a bit about the organization's recent wins. So, you're a grassroots organization. You're advocates. Tell us about some of the wins.
Yeah, so I think the recent wins that we have, I think there's the wins and then there's defenses.
Yeah. Split those, though, because I think it'll be fun to hear about both those.
Yeah, so wins, I think last year was allowing for more homes to be built in both Hillcrest and University City. There was a lot of mobilized opposition to this, what they're called community plan updates.
Yep.
They would basically upzone the area around the Blue Line trolley to allow more homes, and it really didn't even interfere that much into like the single family areas. But there was so much opposition to that community plan update. So one of our clear things was to make sure to mobilize in support of it. And that provides the city council members who largely are supportive of the idea that more homes should be built near transit. That's not something that they have too many concerns about, but it gives them a cover to be able to, see people in the community do want to support this, get students from UC San Diego to come out in support of it as well. So I think that was key. The University City area is almost our second downtown. It makes no sense for like the current zoning, which didn't allow so many homes. I used to work in University City and I had to live in Mira Mesa because housing was expensive there. Now housing is expensive in Mira Mesa as well. So, we need to focus on getting the basics of making sure people can live in University City if they work there, and there's already so much transit. Same with Hillcrest. There wasn't as much fervent opposition, thankfully, but that was another area that we mobilized in support to ensure that more homes could be built in Hillcrest, and that's already happening today, but this kind of further allows for more home capacity to be built. So those are some recent wins. I think earlier, maybe 2 years ago, another significant one was the expansion of the city called it transit priority areas.
Yep.
And they turned it into sustainable development areas, which is about this is where we want homes to be built because it's close to jobs, schools, versus out there in sprawl, which would require new infrastructure and more environmental damage. So that expanded from a half mile to a full mile. And the city has a lot of like programs that only work in transit priority areas that became sustainable development areas. So that means all these new programs that incentivize more homes and just make it easier for home builders to build or reduce the costs or incentivize affordable homes just got expanded over a much larger swath of the city. So I think those are some important ones as well. And I think, those are the ones I'd say we mobilized most recently. And we also advocate for things like state bills. But I'd say those are like the more clear wins where there was like a positive event. Then there's defenses.
Yeah, totally. And is there a distinction? I mean, obviously, YIMBY Dems of San Diego is a local chapter, but is there a distinction between YIMBY Dems of San Diego and YIMBY Dems of California? Like, does the state and local groups do a lot together? Do you have different initiatives? How does the paradigm work?
Yeah, so the statewide group is called California YIMBY, and they exclusively focus on state bills and state legislation, how the state government operates. And it allows for a lot of the reforms to happen at the local level by having them kind of work the state legislature. And then we're able to apply and push for things that can now be enacted at the local level. Mm-hmm. California YIMBY is nonpartisan, and they work with Democrats and Republicans to pass bills. And frankly, the housing crisis is something that affects, whatever your partisan identity is.
It should be a nonpartisan issue.
Yeah.
And it has been, luckily, locally.
Yeah. And so the way YIMBY Dems works with California YIMBY is as like a partner group that they'll want to get grassroots support for some of the bills. Thankfully, many of our San Diego state legislators are also relatively pro-housing, so there's usually not as much need to pressure, but there are some cases, and it's also just good to have on a state legislation that has like a supporters list and an opponents list. Get that supporters list as high as possible, and so we can be added to that. And we also focus on things that we think will be especially useful to the San Diego region. For example, this is where we might diverge with California YIMBY, which is looking at statewide. There's some bills that really help San Diego a lot, but may not be as helpful to other regions. For example, things around the Coastal Commission. While, of course, that affects a lot of California, San Diego is more percentage population in the coastal zone than any other county, I believe. So it's like a third of the population, or like 20% of the population, whereas Orange County might be like 10%, or LA County, something like that. So rules that reform the Coastal Commission and their authority to block homes are much more impactful to San Diego.
Totally.
So we might be spending more time on that type of state bills to support.
Understood. Coming back a little bit to home ownership, Nate, I want to get your take on this. So we talked on like some of these programs that are coming online, right, where you could potentially sell ADUs. Talking about affordability, like where would you think your clients would consider affordable starter home? And mind you, right now, like median income is what? Median home price in San Diego is $1 million. Problem is, it's a dilapidated home that needs what, 100, 200,000 in renovation.
200.
So you need 200,000, which is not financeable. So you got to put the down payment plus spend $200K to renovate the home and make it current. So like, what do you think your clients would find is a affordable starter home?
Interest rates dictate that, right? So interest rates we've seen double, right, in the last 3 or 4 years. So in the past, just 3 or 4 years ago, I think 600,000, 700,000 would have been a pretty decent number for someone to think that could be my starter number. So now, not only do we not have those homes available because the median house price has jumped crazy to $1 million, but the interest rates are so high. It's impossible almost at this point for them. I think condos, are a good option for people. That $500,000, $600,000 range of condos. I think it's hard. I know there's a lot of initiatives.
You're talking about like 2 bedrooms.
2 bedroom.
Yeah. So you're going to see probably a higher price. Like for a starter home for a family, let's say a 3-bed, right? I'm wondering where is that like? It's without doing the empirical like study and really understanding the balance between income and monthly cost, but like your gut feeling is what is that?
800 is bottom of the barrel. And that's how it's working. And those are not the most desirable areas for these people. You really have to sell them on the idea of ownership and change and growth in neighborhoods. But $1 million is probably where most people are going to be. That's probably your 800 to $1 million is your starting point. That's a tough number for people. Incomes haven't necessarily came up. So how do we get people in these homes? I like the idea of AB 33, 1033, and the idea of selling the ADU. I think that's going to be a huge thing. These ADUs are smaller, right? People would love to sell these homes. They're building them for $300 a foot. They're worth $500 a foot. It's affordable to the buyer. I think that's going to be a big step towards people buying these properties.
Yeah.
It's a lot of people who have been in these homes for a long time. It might be an elderly person. They can't move. I think they would love to split the property and reap those benefits, take the money. That's their retirement also at the same time.
I think you just touched on such an important element of that is, again, that 1 plus, like we're in the housing world of how do you get 1 + 1 = 3? Because you just got to do more with less right now. And that's such an important element. Like, so a retiree who doesn't have the means to leave their home or doesn't want to leave their home, but they might need income or they need some money for care, they can now unlock their backyard, for example, and create housing for others, right? And so, like, that's powerful.
I think you're going to see a huge uproar of sales versus rentals in that point. Because I think if they have the option to sell, I think that they'd rather sell. No,
listen, I have a lot of tenants who are well-to-do, and well-to-do, hardworking, middle-income folks who would love to buy, but they just can't. And so they're paying, $3,000, $3,200 a month. They would gladly pay add $1,000 and own something, knowing they can create some wealth for themselves and start to grow. And, eventually they'll sell that starter home, move into something else, but it creates a path towards creating some generational wealth, which is really big. Right. And I think it's for the generation that's, over the last 20 years, that's becoming increasingly more difficult to just jump on the train.
People don't realize it's not just a house. It's a big stepping stone. We leverage it later. We pull money out. We take equity lines of credit. These things are fueling other kinds of enterprises and businesses and American and ideas. And without that, how would they do that? The home is probably the best way to get that wealth and to get that money. So how are they going to do that with renting? That we have to create. And I'm so big on that. We have to. I'm seeing it firsthand, where it feels like we're going to be in a world with 90% renters.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. This has been an engaging conversation. Saad, anything else you'd like to add? I mean, I know the organization's got its hands in so many different things, and I'll tell you, it's very powerful to have a group like yours, and I think that renters, stakeholders in housing are very thankful for that, because it is a grassroots group and it means people give a shit, right? The people that are there, they really care. And that's special and very important. Anything else you'd like to add that you think our listeners would like to hear?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. We are a group of largely, I don't think many of us are, necessarily in the real estate or development ecosystem. A lot of the folks are just want a shot at home ownership and feel that kind of door has been closed out of them. So that's why we fight for what we fight for. I think the only other thing is just, there's going to be some more policies that the city is considering. So part of the, AB 1033 is, allowing ADUs to be sold as condos. But we also need to make sure that we're producing more of those ADUs in the first place. And you're likely aware of the ADU density bonus program that allows home builders to build more homes if some of them are reserved as affordable. And it's largely produced affordable to middle-income individual or middle-income folks. That program has been under attack. And there's some cases where the projects have been a little over the top.
Some outliers.
Yeah. And that's been used as kind of like the poster child for this is the entirety of the program. Whereas, most of the program is producing about 4 to 12, 4 to 10 units in large backyards and homes that were underdeveloped, dilapidated, and backyards that were just overgrown and underused. So really making more of the use of our land. So the city is going to be considering how to revise that program. They thankfully didn't repeal the entirety of it. So we're going to be promoting and defending that program to make sure that, there's a right balance there, that we don't allow for some of these outlier projects, but we still allow for some more building as well. And then another thing that we'll be focusing on probably later in the year, maybe into next year, is about historic preservation reform.
Big.
Yeah. So there's a lot of folks are just using historic as a way to just circumvent and stop housing laws from being applied. And, historic structures are important. Historic preservation is important. But when it's just used as a way to avoid new housing in your neighborhood, and you just want to, again, rip up the ladder and prevent people from living near you, that's got to stop. And it's also just a lot of capacity of the planning department. This is crazy that in San Diego, if a building is over 45 years old and you want to modify it, it has to go through historic review.
Which right now, okay, so if you think about 40 to 45 year window, it's 1980. 1980, look at the housing stock in San Diego. I think 80% of it was between 1970 and 1980. I mean, so it's if it's not already in that historic window, it's going to be there very soon. 1980 was it feels like yesterday. I mean, I'm younger than that, but with just 1980 feels like it was yesterday.
No, it was. I've seen this firsthand where you can go in any direction with historical. You want to prove it not historical? It's just about money. You want to prove it historical? It's about money.
But it's a roadblock, and it's a regulation that gets in the way of housing.
I'm saying more of it from a bullshit factor. You know what I mean? That's where it is. It's whatever you want it to be, and whoever puts up the money to fight which way you want to go.
Yeah, there's an insane case or insane example in South Park or some area where there's a historic district was applied to all these areas, all these buildings, and this person who wanted to make some modifications to their home, he didn't he just learned about it afterward. And so he had to like fight and prove, as you said, that his house was actually not a historic craftsman bungalow. It was like some other like a row house architecture. So he had to go out of his way and find like an architecture historian to prove that his house was not that. And nobody even ever asked him about it in the first place. It's just crazy that you just like put up those barriers to folks. And yeah.
They just want to put that want to put roofs over people's heads. That's what it is. If we weren't in a crisis and rents were cheap and houses were easy to buy, maybe the dialect would be different, right? But we're very much in a high stress crisis of housing. Guys, that's been an awesome conversation. Thank you. We've got to let people know how to join YIMBY Dems. How do they find you? How do they sign up if they want to be involved in the cause? And like, do you guys have some meetups that you maybe want to announce? And so for all our listeners that want to get engaged, like let's give them a place to do that.
Yeah. So I think first place is our website, yimbydemssd.com. And that's also our tag on Instagram and Twitter, yimbydemssd. Also, we do have regular meetups. We meet up on the fourth Wednesdays at Park and Rec in University Heights at 6:30 p.m. and it runs about an hour to an hour and a half. And we also have additional meetings that if you sign up for our newsletter on our website, you can kind of find out about. But we're pretty active online. We're meet up regularly in person, and we show up at City Hall a lot. So lots of places to find us.
You guys do the hard work. Thank you to you and your organization. Nate, they're going to fight for the policy. We're going to build it. You're going to sell it. How do people find you?
You guys can find me, look me up, Nathan Abo. I am everywhere. You guys just put that in that Google search. But I'm all about doing real estate the right way, finding these opportunities for people, going deep like we just did with Saad, and figuring out how we can make this work.
Fantastic. And I'm Daniel Skolnick, founder and CEO of Atlas West Group. You can find us at atlaswestgroup.com. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Doors.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Doors. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. To hear other episodes or read the associated blogs, visit olismedia.com, and be sure to follow the hosts on Instagram at Nate Abo Homes and at atlaswestgroup.com. The guest views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are their own. The information presented is for general information purposes only and is not intended to be legal advice. Beyond the Doors is produced in studios in San Diego, California and Tijuana, Baja California. Olis Media is an IVC media company.
Olis Media.